Good afternoon and welcome to today's Naturally Chicago webinar, Manage Your Retailer Sell Story for Expo West, featuring Fresh Thyme Market and Spins. I'm pleased to introduce Jim Slama, Managing Director of Naturally Chicago.
Thank you, Bob. Expo West is the big kahuna of trade shows in the natural products industry. Last year, 65,000 attendees came to visit the booths of 3,000 vendors showing their wares. For brands, there is no better place to connect with retail buyers. For me, this will be my 28th Expo West, and attending the show has changed my life. It helped me build relationships with so many industry leaders, brands, retailers, investors, service providers, and more. Even my position in Natural Chicago came about as a result of an Expo West connection. 5 years ago, Carlotta Mass, who runs New Hope and produces Expo West, asked me to launch Naturally Chicago. At the time, she was also the chair of Naturally Boulder and was spurring on the creation of the Naturally Network to create chapters across the country. So I asked my friends Brandon Barnholt of KeHE, Tony Olson of Spins, and Bill Weiland of Presence Marketing. They became our co-founders and helped us build a thriving Naturally Chicago. Thank you, Expo West. So Spins is a key driver of today's webinar. They're an incredible partner of Natural Chicago and support brands, investors, and retailers to truly understand the trends and market opportunities through the use of data. In today's webinar, Benji Fitts, Director of Growth Strategy of Spins, will discuss how he can stand out to retailers at the show with data and insights they care most about. Retailers are also a huge part of Expo West, and buyers from Whole Foods, Kroger's, Walmart, Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Thrive, and many more will attend. Today, we're fortunate to lead today's webinar off with Natural Chicago board member Jonathan Lawrence, who is the Vice President of Center Store at Fresh Thyme Market, a fast-growing, innovative, supernatural retailer. Jonathan will share his insights about how Fresh Thyme selects brands to stock and how they partner with brands to succeed and grow over time. So today's agenda includes, number one, tips for having effective conversations with retailers at Expo West. That'll be Jonathan. How to use data to successfully engage with retailers during and after the show. That'll be Benji. And then lastly, there will be an open Q&A where the audience will be invited to participate. I'll moderate. There's a Q&A button down on the bottom. Please ask your questions there. So let's start off with Jonathan Lawrence. Welcome.
Thanks, Jim. And I got to say, I'm a huge fan of Expo West. Any of the trade shows I've been fortunate enough to go since I was actually like a little kid, getting kind of tagged along, and so now to see how far it's come today, it's very impressive, and I think it can be very intimidating not only to retailers and new buyers, but also to brands, especially new brands. So I really was happy to be asked to do this and kind of jumped at the chance to kind of talk about if you're a vendor out there, how to get in front of retailers and do it the right way to where you're effective, you make an impression, and hopefully you make that connection and get your product on their shelves. So, all right, tip number one, how to capture the retailer's attention. So there's thousands of brands at Expo West. We do our best to cover as much as we can. So an example would be I'm sending a total of 15 people are going to the show, and part of that is to be able to divide and conquer and get around as much as we can. But there's only so much you can see, so we really try to utilize the time as best as we can and be as effective as we can. So first thing you got to do is, how do you capture our attention? So when we're walking around, you might have just a few moments, and when you're talking to a retailer, a broker, whoever it may be, first thing you want to do is share the highlights around your brand strategy. Why did you create this product? Why do you exist, right? It's almost your elevator pitch behind just the product alone. Share why your brand's innovative, We're all there looking for innovation, right? We know what's out there and what's winning and what may be declining, and part of that's our partnership with Spins. We're out there looking for what's next, and that's the lifeblood of the natural foods industry. We go out and find the next new brands, we launch them in our stores, we build up those brands, and then eventually they go into mass or conventional markets. But ultimately, the natural food space is poised to launch innovation. So you got to tell us, why is your product different or unique if it doesn't stand out immediately? When I think about what's on our shelves today, if it's not something that I have, then I'm looking for it, right? If your product can add something that solves a solution for one of our customers, then you have a shot. So really tell, why is your product unique on the market today? Also, make sure your product is unique. Understand what's out there today. A lot of times brands will say, hey, we got this unique new product. I may already have something like that already, but you might not have been aware of it. So understand the market that you're in. Share how you're differentiated from what the retailer carries. That's what we kind of just talked through, right? So if you may not know everything that I carry, but you should know what's in the market and what's in that space, to kind of share those thoughts. And again, that's where Spins can be a great partner. And then within the natural foods industry, emphasize your unique mission. Why do you do what you do? What impact are you having on the world, on your communities? Something bigger than just the product themselves. And then as you continue to talk with those retailers, say you get on the shelf, how are you going to get that product off the shelf? How are you going to take care of those stores? Are you partnering with a broker? Do you have reps? How can you educate my teams at store level? So again, it's not just about the product and getting on the shelf, but how can you continue to support and serve the retailers? All right, we can move on to the next one. This is my favorite. So have a positive and open-minded attitude. Be open to having conversations with people at all levels. So if you've been to the show, you see all that the lanyards and the name tags we're wearing. Sometimes we try to hide a little bit. We'll flip it over, but they figured that out. Now the name and retailers on both sides. So we get a lot of attention, but we're not the only decision makers out there. And also, there are ways that where you can have an impact and get great feedback from everyone. So I would approach as best you can is when you're talking about your brand, your product, talk to everyone that'll listen, because one, everyone's a consumer. So your product could be their next new product they tell people about. They might be able to give you great feedback. They might be able to make a great connection for you or get you connected with someone. So you just never know. An example I had when I was on the brand side, I was new. I was the young person on the team. So I talked to everyone. And I remember one of the people that had been there a little bit longer said, don't waste your time on that person, right? Well, that person actually happened to be connected to the international market. And we made the biggest sale of the day just because I talked to that person. So again, go in with an open mind, and because you never know who you're going to run into. Not everyone with a retailer badge can ultimately help you. And that kind of continues to the next one. Don't be afraid. Brands, brokers, talk to the other brands. When you're at your booth, some of those best connections are the people right next to you, right? Again, so the natural foods community is all connected. So I would say go into that with an open mind and don't just focus on the retailers. Next slide. Be efficient with your time. Again, I mentioned there's thousands of retailers or thousands of brands out there. So you don't get a lot of time. Make sure you're prepared. Have your kind of elevator pitch ready. Have maybe a sell sheet, product samples ready. Not every retailer is probably going to take samples or information, but you can capture their information. You can make sure you get that to them. I want to be careful how I put this, where I say it's okay to be aggressive. I was actually having a great conversation with a colleague from another retailer earlier this week, and they had talked about where they were walking through and someone grabbed them on the shoulder and pulled them back, which that's a no-no. Don't do that. But when I say aggressive, I mean, as I'm walking through the show floor, I'm going pretty quickly and I'm looking at things on each side to see what stands out. I might miss something, but sometimes a person will kind of jump out and say, hey, have you ever tried this product? Can I tell you about it? More often than not, we're not going to say no. We'll say, sure, yeah, tell me about your product, you know? So make sure you're engaging. Don't be sitting back behind your booth. Don't be on your phone looking down. Act like you want to be there. Enjoy it. Enjoy the fact that you're in front of all these people at the biggest trade show, or biggest natural trade show in the world. Make sure you're connecting with people, eye contact. For brands that, if you're already in certain retailers, as a retailer, I'm not going to go, my focus isn't on the brands that are already in our store. Unless there's something specific we need to talk about, or if there's a major issue we need to solve. Typically we'll say hello. We'll make sure that our reps, bosses know that they're doing a great job. We've got a great relationship and everything is good, right? But we're going to focus on what's new out there in brands we haven't heard of or haven't seen. And so that should be shared on your side as well. So if you have retailers that are coming by, make sure you take care of them. If there's anything you need to cover, do that. But I would focus on new retailers or new people that you don't have those relationships with. And then keep conversations going. Not everything happens on the trade floor. I always joke, like, when we're at the show, you're always on. So the second you walk out of your hotel door, you are on. Great connections can be made in hallways, in passing, on the show floor, off the show floor, at dinner. We all know between the Hilton and the Marriott bars, there's a lot of connections made there after hours. But your approach should be different, right? So when I'm on the show floor and I'm a retailer with my badge on, I'm walking around, yes, that's your time to be very engaging. If you see someone, another retailer, maybe at dinner or walking around, say hi to them, introduce yourself. Don't come on heavy, but you can still make that connection. So utilize all the time that you have while you're there. You'll have plenty of time to rest when you get home. So make sure that you're not leaving anything out there. Next slide. Follow-up. So as a retailer, once we get home, we're exhausted. But then guess what? Monday comes around and it's back to work. It's back to being what I always say. It's back to the grind. So hopefully, as a brand, you get a little time after the show to look over your notes, take a little time, but then make sure you're following up. So when you follow up, I would say a personalized note. Don't just send a canned email, right? That's not very personal and doesn't show that you took the time to connect after. Send samples. Again, I don't fly to Anaheim with like 9 bags because it's $30 a piece, right? So I'm not going to take every sample home, but I will send you my information, or when we connect, you'll have our information. So send samples after. Send them to the office. I would say between a week to 2 weeks after. If it goes further than that, it might not be top of mind anymore. So make sure you act fast. And then I'd follow up with the email and the samples and then a sell sheet. Because that again will remind me of what I saw, what's unique about the product. Is it carried in certain distributors? What's the price point? All that information should be right at hand for me. So again, when you're at the show, connect with everyone that you can, enjoy it, have fun, first and foremost. That's one of the best things about the show is you get tons of energy coming back, and everyone I think is really motivated after the show. Engage with people, have your pitch ready, know your product, and then follow up after and see where it goes. And I think that's it. So hopefully that helps. Again, I would say the best thing about it is make sure you're engaging, have fun, and tell what's unique about your product.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. And Benji Fitts, it's all about you right now.
All right. Hey, well, thank you. So, like Jonathan said, follow up with the sales sheet, sales slick, one up, one cheater, whatever you want to call it. You're probably going to need this little thing, right, for your booth presence. So I just would like to talk about kind of some best practices, in building one of these essential pieces of collateral to have at your booth. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so you're at your booth, spent a lot of money to get to Expo West. You're meeting people, shaking hands, all that sort of fun stuff. And you're going to need this little piece of paper, the sell sheet, to kind of like talk about your product, right? And I'd say, generally speaking, there are just some simple things that you can do to make sure that your sell sheet looks good, right? First of all, just accept how small and minimal this is. It's like usually a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, usually double-sided, I'd say. But you don't have like a lot of visual real estate or real estate at all, especially compared to like a pitch deck or something like that. So really, this is have to be like an amalgamation of your best things that you could possibly say about your product, right? So be brief, be succinct, and get the message across, very, very succinctly. Second, if you know what your key message is, oh, I make a turmeric wellness elixir or whatever, like if you have this sell sheet in front of you, it's already designed, it's first draft, second draft, whatever. Put it right in front of you and squint your eyes at it. And if the biggest, most unique thing about your product or whatever message you're trying to convey isn't immediately apparent with that squint test, you need to redesign whatever you're doing. Okay, we call that the squint test. And then, like Jonathan said earlier, really, these shows are really all about discovery, finding out what's new, what's next, So make sure that, like, probably your biggest message, if this is what's driving your product, is what is like differentiated, innovative, what's new and fresh about whatever you're making. Make sure that's like the primary message that a user is going to receive whenever they pick up one of these pieces of paper. Next slide. So this isn't a fully exhaustive checklist, but I think that this will kind of help you along. And if, a couple of these things work out better for your brand than others, that's great. But I've kind of divided what more or less you see on average into two buckets here. So we have our qualitative key elements, which is this slide. We have our quantitative key elements, which we'll talk about in a minute. So qualitative. So that's talking about the quality of something rather than the quantity of something. So this is like the story part of it, the squishy part of whatever you're trying to express, right? So this is where you're going to have your brand story, the mission, the reason, in a nutshell, why you're doing what you're doing. If it's really interesting and cool and unique and differentiated, talk about it, like bring attention to that. I think that one thing that's cool about Expo or really any of these trade shows is the storytelling element is really what drives a lot of the passion behind things. It's a very passionate group of buyers, of people, it's a passionate industry, so lean into that a little bit, right? Make sure you're highlighting, succinctly and, the key differences between you and the competition, if there are some, this is also a place where a lot of brands talk about UPC and item level information, so that can be sort of like the size of the product or the case count or, yada, yada. Don't forget having the UPC on there. It's also a great spot to kind of maybe talk about your outside of the store efforts to bolster your product. Like if this, say you got started in, DTC, right? You started online first, what kind of results did you get from that? Like how many, data points could you pull out of that and say, like, well, we've been successful here and like, this is what we kind of did. And we have this many users or this many repeat buyers and we have 5 stars on Amazon or whatever, right? Talk about how you're supporting the product outside of the store, because that'll be relevant to any retailer. It's also smart to sometimes talk about your, distribution partners or other kind of like people you were already partnered with as well. And don't forget to put your contact info and a call to action, so don't just put a name and a phone number on there, but say like, give me a call and let's do business together. Say it better than that, but you get the idea. Next slide, please. So now hard numbers. And this is kind of where you can do pretty much everything on that first slide without any sort of syndicated point of sale data, right? But sometimes point of sale data can be really helpful to building a good sell sheet, So, Spins is obviously a provider of syndicated data here, but some of the things that we like to put on these things when we're asked by clients to build them are some simple comparisons. That's what this is all going to boil down to. So your sales or your sales growth versus the category. Often this is like written down as a multiplier. Like, if the categories grew 10% and you grew 100%, to 10x the category growth. People love those X's. Rank can also be really cool. Like if you're the #1 growing brand, the #2 growing brand, something like that. Ranking your performance can be really, really nice. Velocity, the king metric, right? Can't really be picked apart like sales growth. You can't grow at 100% forever, right? But your sell-through numbers or your velocity rates, those can be something that you can brag about, especially if they're good. And my advice, if you're going to put velocity on a sales sheet, would be make it as simple as possible. So there's 8 different ways you can measure velocity. Most people are conversant in dollars per store per week or units per store per week, right? Just make it easy, right? And it can also be really good if you're kind of comparing your velocity overall to other brands, if you're double their velocity or something like that. If you've launched any new items recently, and they've been successful in the market, talk about that. That can be really cool. A lot of brands launch stuff at Expo, but some of them do things, throughout the year. And so if you have some early performance, pulled out there, like you were the #1 new chutney in the, natural enhanced channel or natural expanded channel as it is, then talk about that, simple pull out from a lot of dashboards we have at Spins. And then finally, from like a design perspective, make sure you're keeping it very visual. I mean, people are visual learners, it's a visual medium, hopefully maybe you'd have a graphic designer that could help you out with this, but make it a little bit varied, right? Don't have it just be tables or bar charts or whatever. Mix things up. Have a chart, have a table, have a band. What's a band? It's a big ass number. That's what it is. Have some different elements on there just to make it a little bit more visually appealing. And my gold standard for the folks that I work with at Spins is when someone first looks at whatever you've made, they should feel the point before they understand it. So aim for that. Next slide, please. So let's come through some examples here. So I was just at the Winter Fancy Foods show in Las Vegas, and so I snapped a couple pictures here. So I've got 3 kind of examples we're going to go through. So example 1, gel shots. What is that? Well, it's the world's first cocktail flavored gelatin specially formulated to blend with alcohol. Okay, well that tells me what it is. All right, we got some differentiation. It's not just Jello. Cool. This has some UPCs on there. That's cool. It's got some pricing or MSRP on there. That's great. Pack count, contact info. Check, check, check. Okay. It is a little bit lacking in the, how this is doing department. Like some comparisons here about, its growth or potential or something like that would be great. So I'd say that this is, it's okay. It's okay. But, it could be spiced up a little bit. So something to think about. Let's go to example 2. Okay, all right. Umami Joy Sauce. That's a cool name for a product. Interesting. I walked by the Kikkoman booth and I was like, Umami Joy Sauce, what is that? What is it? Well, let's read about it. Da, 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 da. It is made out of tomatoes. Oh, okay. All right. So it's like a soy sauce made out of tomatoes. Interesting. I like what they did here. They have some differentiators here, no soybeans, no wheat, no gluten. That's important to a lot of people. They sized the market, which I thought was interesting, I suppose, but, so it's got a lot of information about the products, good picture on there, kind of looks good. I'd say it's a little heavy on the tables, if I had to pick it apart a little bit, versus other ways to present information, it's tables, tables, tables. But it's still pretty good, gets the point across, So let's go to example number 3. So this is actually a sales sheet that we did for one of our clients, which is Tasty Bite. And we had a contest among our group of senior analysts to create the winningest sales sheet. And this one actually won, so it was kind of fun. And I wanted to bring it to you guys' attention today. So this is about Tasty Bite. So it's Indian food, right? And so it has a little blurb about what it is. It has a nice product picture there. And we have a nice variety of like visuals, like our bar chart with a Kager. We have a pie chart. We have another bar chart. And then we've got our bands on page 2, along with some nice UPC level information, some sales and sales percent change right there. So we see that sticky rice item that's like 6 down the page is doing really, really good. We're just visualizing some numbers here. And I think that's just a really good practice for people to get like into, right? So bring it to life. Show, don't tell. So thank you.
Excellent. And that's a very fine Chicago-based company there, Tasty Bite, whose products I love. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So next steps, I think we're going to just do a brief discussion about a couple of events coming up. So down below, I don't think we're going in the chat. I think we're going in the Q&A. So if you have questions for Jonathan or Benji, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom. And so in terms of Fresh Thyme, Jonathan, you want to talk about connecting with Fresh Thyme?
Sure.
And what do you recommend?
Yeah, so we typically go a little early. We will have a meeting room on Wednesday, but that's more specifically for meetings that we make with our vendors. So again, that we can have that kind of time to connect and go through some new business, so that we can be really focused on the floor, looking at what's new and innovative out there. So there's not necessarily an opportunity, for newer brands to come and into the meeting room, unless maybe you're partnering with a broker, or maybe you have a quick meeting. But you'll definitely see a lot of us out there on the floor. If you don't see any of us, you can always connect with us either through LinkedIn. You can go to our website and submit products, or try to get information. But I would say this year we're not necessarily doing like a town hall or anything. We typically do that about every other year. But we'll be there in full force. So you should meet a lot of us.
Great, Jonathan. And can you just briefly talk about your category management team?
Sure. So as I mentioned, there's a number of them. So we'll have what we call senior category managers, which is kind of like a director, right? So they're leading that team. We'll have one for dry grocery and bulk, dairy, frozen, alcohol, as well as natural living. Within those teams, then you'll have category managers. We got 3 for dry grocery that'll be there, 1 for dairy, 1 for frozen, and then the natural living team, which will have 2 for vitamins, and 1 for body care, and 1 for general merchandise. So they'll all be at the show, walking their different areas, as well as I think we'll have some of our marketing team and some of the other senior leadership as well.
Got it. Thank you. And then Benji, talk about Spins, how to connect with Spins.
Well, we're going to be all over this show. I think
just look for the Spins t-shirt, the blazer, the jeans, and the white shoes. That's the Spins.
I'm still waiting for my Spins swag, which I would have loved to wear today, Mike Irwin, but you haven't gotten me any. Sorry.
I will go hammer him. I'm going to see him next week, so I'm going to make sure that he gets an earful from me about that. Yeah, the white shoes. Look for the white shoes. We all wear white shoes. It's like a thing. But there's about 70 of us going to the show.
Wow.
So we have 2 booths here. We've got a booth in the main hall. And then we also have a booth in the hot products section, which is like super exciting part of the show to be in. But we'll also be participating in like the opening keynote with Catherine Peters. I'll be doing the business school thing, on Tuesday morning. So if you guys are going to that, please sign up for one of my sessions. I love that. But we'll also be hosting like parties and all sorts of crazy things throughout the show. But if you'd like to schedule a meeting with somebody from Spins and learn more about kind of what we do and how we can help you out, please shoot us an email at growth@spins.com and we can hook up a meeting and get to talking.
Great. Thank you, Benji. Next slide, please.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This
A little bit more from Benji.
Yeah. Okay. This is actually very exciting. And what this is called Spins Ignite. Okay. So this is targeted towards brands who are, you've got a product, you're on your journey, but you're kind of like in the beginning part of your journey, okay, of, world domination, right? So what this is a kind of website you'll go to, which is spins.com/ignite. You'll sign up for this, and it's like a portal where it has a blend of like thought leadership, also kind of like how-to content, similar to stuff like what we're doing right now. Also category trends that are personalized to whatever product that you are making, right? Where you can get like data updates, kind of like on I believe a quarterly basis, which is really, really cool. So if you're interested in learning more about the world of data and getting a little bit of free data too, spins.com Ignite is where you should go today to go sign up. We officially launched this thing at Expo West, but you can sign up for it like a little bit early right now. I think this is the first time we're talking publicly about it, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
So check it out. Man, you should do this. Do this.
Excellent. Well, and thank you. And of course, Naturally Chicago loves these scoops, so we appreciate it. Thank you. And and by the way, we will send out when the webinar is done to everybody who's registered, both the full recording, a synopsis of what the key points were, as well as this website from Spins where folks can sign up for that. So check it out when we send it. We'll be sending it within the next few days. Next slide, please. All right, so a little plug for future Naturally Chicago events. If you're a brand out there and you're growing, number one, just how expensive it is to grow because, you've got inventory, you've got trade spend, you've got brokerage fees, you've got distributor fees, on and on and on. You've got chargebacks. So, and you don't want to run out of money. And unfortunately, I've seen brands running out of money who have gone out of business. Very difficult. And right now is not the easiest time to raise capital. Therefore, Naturally Chicago and Naturally Boulder are doing a webinar on March 6th, talking about stop looking for the wrong funding, raising capital in challenging times. And Elliot Began, if you don't know him, Elliot's a guru in alternative financing for emerging brands. And he's got all kinds of tips and methods, and many of these methods not only cut risk for the investors, but they also cut risk for the brand. So it's a total win-win. And they can work in an environment like now when funding is really hard to get. So if you're one of those brands who are concerned about capital, come to this webinar. It's going to be awesome. Next slide, please. Spring Fling, those of you in Chicago, got to come out. We're having a little March Madness party at Pappy's Speakeasy at SRW. SRW is a great digital agency and a Natural Chicago board member. Good food and cocktails, great people, and March Madness all in one night. So come on out, have some fun. It's the week after Expo West, so you can also kind of like breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, that's past me. Now it's time to like get out there and contact those retailers. It's a week later, and Jonathan said I need to send my notes out tomorrow. So anyway, you're gonna have a cocktail to kind of prepare for that. Next slide, please. Oh, and the Expo West kickoff party presented by Spins. And this is a Naturally Network party. And you know what? Last year, it was the biggest party at Expo West. Very proud that Naturally Network put that on. Thank you, New Hope. Thank you, Moss Adams, Beyond Brands. And especially thank you, Spins, who's the host sponsor of this party. It's a great event. We hope you can join us. All right, so Q&A. So people have questions. We've only got two. Please put them in the Q&A at the bottom. And, I got a question. So, I find for both of you, and hopefully at least one of you has an answer. there's a lot of magic that goes on at Expo West that just kind of like happens. And, it's like one of those amazing things that just like you meet somebody and everything changes. Do you guys have any examples in your own personal lives or within your companies where, you had just an encounter at Expo West and it was just like something clicked and it brought about major change with you or a company? Either of you?
It's kind of hard to define. I mean, I think you always get something every day. A lot of it is seeing people you've worked with in the past, right? Everyone kind of gets reconnected because everyone in the industry is there. I would say the energy that you get from being there and what you take back it is huge. I've met brands that were local brands. I remember there was one I was I think was speaking at one of the conferences, and they were there and like, oh, we're waiting for you, and I was like, me? Like, okay, what's up? How can I help you? And they were a local brand in one of our stores, and they were just asking about, hey, how do we get more distribution? How do we get off the shelf? So I was able to spend some time with them. You get to see industry pioneers, like you're walking and all of a sudden you see Jimbo, and I've been that person that stopped and said, hey, Jimbo, you don't know me. My name is Jonathan, but I'm a fan. I love your stores. And so you never know. But you're always making connections at all different levels of the business, and it's similar to like the Naturally Network, right? It's not just retail, broker, brand. You're meeting people at every different element within the business and every different level. So I would say it to me, it doesn't come down to necessarily one connection. It's just all the connections that you have, both new and the ones that you're just happy to see, because we're all part of this tribe in this industry, right? And so in the rest of the world, we might be a little different, a little off. We might be overly passionate about things. We might all, maybe not everyone feels like they're trying to change the world every day like we do. But when we're all together like that, it's just amazing to be a part of that community.
Yep, no doubt. Benji, anything more to add on the kind of magic of Expo West?
I'd say two things. A long time ago, like 2009, my first job in the natural industry, I worked for a tofu company, right? So I don't think the word plant-based had been invented yet. All we had back then was vegan. That's how that's how we talked about the world. And it's funny, like you get this random booth, your neighbors or whatever. And I always thought it was kind of fun to get to know your neighbors at the trade show. And sometimes it kind of pays off. Like our neighbor one year at Expo East was like Sanjay. So they were like the tamari company, right? They made like that sort of stuff. And I struck up a little thing with them where whenever I did a demo, I would have Sanjay sauce, and they would send me some free sauce, and it was just like a little great fun thing, and that continued for like 2 years or something like that. So just be open, like to Jonathan's point, to like anybody and anything. It's like a great way to meet people. And the other thing I'd say that's really cool about Expo is like our day to day. If you're a brand, it's like a kind of lonely existence. It's very siloed, like it's do you ever talk to the competition at all? Probably not, but these shows are a really great place to be able to like meet other like-minded people and like commiserate with them, and talk about like kind of what's going on in your business, and you just build these friendships from that. And I think that's just a really beautiful, amazing thing, is just to be able to talk with somebody about the crazy CPG struggles that everybody has, but just due to the nature of our everyday, who are we going to talk about it with? Our spouse or something? They're probably sick of it. So it's just great to be able to like forge a connection with like somebody else that's like facing probably the same struggles that you face.
Yeah, I real quick, I'd agree 100%. Like, I love talking to other retailers because we all have the same struggles. We all have the same things that we love, but we all kind of go through it the same way. So it's sometimes you feel like you're unique or you're in this island, right? And then you go there, and whether it's an independent, it's a large chain, whatever it may be, you all kind of really understand each other. And that's the same thing with the brands. I love seeing brands talk to each other, say like, especially if you're in the same category, like don't badmouth another brand and say, hey, this one is bad, because I might carry that product. I might have a great relationship with that person and you just turn me off. So you should want everyone to win. There is space for everyone to win within that. So I would say, make those connections with those brands, because again, they might have an in with a manufacturer or a broker or someone, or they might know, hey, who's that buyer at HEB that I'm trying to get a hold of? Like, what I love is all those groups kind of get together. We all help each other. So if you're not a part of that, then you're not benefiting from it.
Yep, no doubt about it. For me, I think it was 2019. I was walking the show and I saw Walter Robb. Walter was former CEO, co-CEO of Whole Foods, and he and I launched the Good Food Business Accelerator. Whole Foods, my partner, when we launched this, which was amazing to have them as a partner in an emerging brand program. And so we were pretty tight. And I'm walking the floor and hey Jim, how you doing? Hugs. And then he's like, oh, right there, Jim, I want to introduce you. And so he introduces me to the head of venture from 7-Eleven, who, starting to look more at emerging brands. And so I started that day kind of building a relationship with 7-Eleven. And you know what? We just cut a deal, Greg Keller and I, for 7-Eleven's Midwest, which is 250 stores, for us to source brands for their next showcase that they're having in June. And that started like 5 years ago at Expo West because Walter made an introduction. And, if we bring 10 or 15 or 20 brands into this showcase and, they start moving at 7-Eleven, that's a huge win for everybody, for Natural Chicago, for the brands, and hopefully for 7-Eleven as they start to pivot a little bit more to, fresh and natural foods. So, there's opportunities there and you never know. And, to Jonathan's point, stay off your phone, look people in the eye, be engaged, and you just never know what's going to happen. It's really a magical place. So Q&A. All right. The audience is starting to respond. Yes. So from Jonathan, what are you looking for when it comes to spins, attributes, and trends? Anything specifically in terms of folks who want to elevate their assortments?
Yeah, I would say, regenerative agriculture is obviously big and kind of on the forefront of what we're going after. Women, BIPOC owned. There's certain, I wouldn't say there's any product specific or ingredient specific right now that I would say we're sticking out. We'll typically work with our inside spins team. So his name is Danny Banis. He's great. I've worked with Simon Cutts for a long time at Fresh Thyme, and so and now it spins, and so they're armed with giving us like, hey, here are the top trends. Here's the gaps that you have in your assortment. Here are the categories that are trending. Here are the vendors that are up that you don't have. Here are the ones that are down that you should probably talk to. So they're a great resource for us and kind of arming us. So that really kind of allows us to game plan prior. So we have our own needs that we feel we want to go after, whether it's being, like the NA category, we're going to look to get a lot broader, international flavors and tastes, kind of that's definitely, trending. So we'll have some of that there. But then also we'll look at like, I think Benji mentioned like velocity, growth, distribution, other things like that as we kind of go in to see what are we missing and where are we leading. And so those are some of the top ones, I would say.
Along those lines, Jonathan, distribution. What are you looking for brands to really deeply consider at Fresh Thyme in terms of, getting the product to your stores or your DCs?
Yeah. I mean, we're blessed in the fact that we're large enough to where like if it's not in KeHE today, like we can work with that. So we would pull enough volume to go into DC 16. There's also the element of like, hey, if it's like a local brand that we want to test, we might partner with Pod, and kind of do a test that way, or at least until they've grown to a certain size to where that demand fits going into maybe a larger distributor. And then we have our DC as well. So there's multiple different ways. We typically reserve our DC for like high volume, high turning items. So you don't necessarily go straight into to our DC. We would look to more if you're in KeHE already, we could make sure you're in our DC. If you're not, then we could work with you and say how what is it going to take in order to get you there.
Right. We just got an email from one of our locally made brands. Locally Made is a program in Natural Chicago. Fresh Thyme is our founding retailer. We introduce them to new brands, and then hopefully they get on shelf and start moving. And, Marilyn from Papadelics, she was at a showcase. You guys loved her. I love that product too. Shiitake mushrooms, fantastic. And, she just sent a note today. Hey, we got into all 70 Fresh Thyme stores, and, Pod help with that. And, so for now we're going through Pod, at some point, if they get into Sprouts or somebody else that KeHE's using, they're going to move into KeHE because that just totally makes sense. And then they'll get into 10 or 20 other retailers. But for now, that Pod connection worked really well. And
it's a good onboarding. Yeah. Like
it's a great onboarding.
Yeah. And so we want to make sure that, it's the right fit for KeHE too, right? Because if we're not pulling enough volume, it may not be the right move for them. So we all have to be responsible in this and make sure we're doing what's right for the brand, what's right for that distributor, and what's right for the retailer.
Yep, no doubt about it. So from Greg Keller, my colleague, hi Greg. We've had hard times where vendors seem to be grabbing all the samples and clogging the booth. Sounds like somebody used to run sales at Frontera Foods. Is this a good thing, or should we discourage this to ensure we can meet buyers that are passing by?
They'll have to come back on Saturday.
That is the day when samples happen.
I think it's both, right? On one hand, like, again, everyone there is a consumer for the natural foods industry. So just because you work for one brand doesn't mean you don't get excited by some other product or you won't want to try it. And you know what? They're also going to tell their friends or other people about that, because what everyone walks around. Oh, what are you seeing at the show? Anything stand out to you? It's all kind of the same thing. Like, oh, is it a good show? Are you having a good show? I think the show's bigger than last year. Mostly the same conversations that we have in a lot of ways. I would say, like, as long as they're not taking advantage of it, you're getting more products in more people's hands that's trying. It's going to talk about your product. So you just created another ambassador. When it becomes an issue, that's where I think you have to say, like, hey, can you come back a little later? Because we're all there. Like, you paid a good amount of money to be there, right? So you need your ROI. You need to make those connections. And then the last day of every show, no one wants to go home with all that product. So when you're on the brand side, that's when you go and you say, hey, can I try this? I'll give you that. You all know how it works. And so Saturday, I would say just wait for your samples then.
Saturday's the swap meet.
Yes.
Excellent. So from Natalie McDonald, Jonathan, this is for you. As a retailer, what makes you stop and want to visit a booth in a crowded aisle?
Often it's a crowded aisle. I hate crowded aisles, honestly. So I think I've said this on a couple different talks, but as a buyer, you're very focused and you're looking at if it's a crowded aisle, you're going to want to see what's there, right? So whether they're doing something that is entertaining, or if there's a tension on their product, like it's like a car accident. You're going to have to look. You're going to have to see what happened, right? It's human nature. But for myself, I'm walking pretty quickly through, because my trick is I'm not looking like this and stopping and seeing. Typically, I'm walking pretty quickly and I'm looking at kind of my peripherals to see what stands out. Because if something stands out to me, then it's going to stand out on the shelf. Because as customers shop, they're going after their list, right? We all create the list. We have the things we're going after, and we might overlook unique products. But if it stands out on the shelf, I'm going to at least look at it for half a second, which is going to draw my attention. What I would say is they're going to find the product somehow. If you've got a crowd, they'll kind of sneak in and look at it. If it's worth their while, they'll wait and they'll to talk to you and learn more. If not, they might be like me where they'll snap a picture and then they'll follow up a little later.
Got it. All right. So from Monica Ifland, not a question, but a comment. I want to thank Spins, as it is so true how much the data can help with your progress with retailers and key accounts. Most all successes I have had, I can attribute to interpreting Spins data and providing insights beyond what the retailers see in their own stores. Wow, that's for a Spins sales sheet, Benji. Hopefully somebody on your team's getting a picture of that one.
I'm going to put that on my sell sheet for Expo West. I'm just going to stick it right there.
Thank you for
Thank
giving
you.
Spins
So
that
nice.
credit. And there's a reason Spins is as successful it is, because they're helping brands, they're helping investors, they're helping retailers, and they're helping other key stakeholders in the industry understand data and how to best optimize what they're doing to be most successful. So, and such a great partner. Let's see, where is it? Berku. We don't receive much response from retailers we spoke to. Our emails are mostly ignored. What would you recommend on this matter? So, Jonathan, I guess that's a question for you.
Yeah.
For somebody who retailers are not really paying attention.
I mean, the hard truth could be that they're just not interested in the product. That sometimes that happens, right? I mean, you have to be open and responsive to any feedback, and hopefully they're giving you feedback. And if they're not, it's tough. We try to do as much as we can, and we're not perfect. But if it's a no, tell them no, and tell them if you have a little bit more time, tell them why. Not just I don't have room on my shelf. Tell them I already have that product, or it didn't stand out to me, or I don't think it's a need from my store, or you need to work on your packaging, or these are the ingredients you need to change. I think if you're making an impactful impression with them on the floor or in any sense, and then you're sending a thoughtful email that isn't like, "Hi, Jonathan Lawrence, I loved your store, Fresh Thyme Market," because we see that all the time, right? So we see that, and sometimes it's just like next. But if you take the time to do that and you're not getting a response, then shame on some of the buyers, because I know they can get jaded and they know they get a lot of emails and everything. But if they're not interested, they should at least respond. So, apologies that happened, but I would say keep following up, right? Because sometimes I may get an email and you're not the priority to me. My first priority is the customer, my team members, the stores. We got a full-time job before we even get into any of the assortment or new brands. Keep following up, right? Get to the point to where you're almost annoying every couple days that it's going to be one more email that's unanswered in their inbox, and then finally they should be able to at least respond. And then I know you're not trying to make them mad or upset, but at least they know your brand now. They know your product, and they're going to at least give you an answer.
Good advice. Let's see. From Lori S. For brands that don't have Spins data, any suggestions, Benji, about creating an interesting sell sheet?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I could answer that in two parts. So one, what's the purpose of the sell sheet, right? Somebody swung by your booth and then they're like interested enough to take something away, right? So what's the purpose of that piece of paper, right? So it needs to clearly communicate what's unique and interesting about your product, right? And it's a takeaway, right? So make sure it's doing that. If your product's not interesting, then it might be hard to make an interesting sell sheet, but that's what the purpose of this is. But I think the kind of underlying question here might be all right, so what if I don't have Spins data? Well, how can I maybe add different data to it to give it some more weight? Because a sell story or a sell sheet in a sense is if you think about it, is an argument, right, that you're making, right, for a product. And I think that there's a lot of great sources for data out there that are free. One of my favorite ones is like Google Trends, like trends.google.com. It's free. You go there and you type in like search queries, and then you can see when search interest in that term spiked. And like a project that I actually used that on was like about chlorophyll. We had a brand that made like chlorophyll, like a supplement chlorophyll, right? And chlorophylls chugging along, doing its green thing, whatever, I don't know. And then it like blew up, and like what had happened was there was like a TikTok thing in like 2021 about chlorophyll, and it was like, on all these influencers' pages and stuff like that, but the cool thing about it was that the trended interest of it continued to kind of grow after this like one event, right? So you can use that to kind of like assess if something's kind of getting more popular or losing popularity or something. So Google Trends is great. TikTok also, if you use it to the web browser and link it to your phone, like they actually have like metrics that you can pull out of that too, and you can find out like for a hashtag, the demographics of people looking at that hashtag. That's cool, TikTok being TikTok, it lumps together everybody that's 35 and over. So I guess that's over the hill to the TikTok crowd. But still, like it also tells you what countries and stuff they come from and associated creators and things like that. It's really cool. So those can be really great sources of data. Also, just like Food Dive, Retail Dive, like those kind of like websites, Winsight, like they always carry a lot of information that a lot of time will have like the size of a category or the growth of a category or something like that. So,
or even like talk about how many stores you're in, how many followers you have on social. There's a lot of different things where you can talk about your brand in ways that don't just connect from a data level, but also then think about who your audience is. Right. So if your audience is a retailer, then try to get your mindset is like, what's helping me? So like, this is the fastest new trend in the category, or, this item solves your dilemma. These are what customers are looking for. How to add items to your basket. Like this category doesn't exist today. So I think there's elements that you can also go after if you think about like who is your customer that you're trying to sell to and what appeals to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it like there's with the sell sheet, the audience is like you, right? And it's not actually the person going in the store and buying the product, So
we're not super boring, right? Like we're not just like, oh, here's like the data is fantastic, but we don't have a lot of time, right? So like that one you did, Benji, on this I think it was the Sanjay, no, the Tasty Bites. That was perfect, right? Like first in this category, big picture of the product, like, and then again, like what is your tagline? Like if I have 2 seconds to look at it, what's going to capture my attention? And I think that's what you have to think about. Like, what is the headline of your sell sheet?
Yeah. Another good question from Simon Solis Cohen. How much pricing data should be on the sell sheet? SRP only or distributor retailer pricing?
I think just the SRP, because everyone's going to have somewhat of a different cost based on where they're pulling it, based on their volume. But SRP is kind of that like, okay, if I'm priced below SRP and typically where I'm at, where is my retail going to be? And then I can ask you what the wholesale cost is. So maybe at most you could say wholesale cost and SRP. Anything more than that, I wouldn't do.
Got it. From Alex Sporoff, as a new brand that's pre-launch, how do we find out how to connect with retailers pre-expo? Any thoughts, Jonathan?
It's hard. We try to like go in a cave and make sure no one can find us sometimes. LinkedIn, New Hope's got a site that they just put out there where you can connect with buyers and buyers can connect with retailers. Range Me. So a lot of people will work through Range Me. If you are working with a broker, right? Sometimes that's that they manage the connection. So that could be a way. It's not super easy, right? And that's why relationships are so important. And if you don't have them, that's why it's great to go to the show and make those relationships, because You may not know who the buyers are or how to connect with them now, but you ask someone that's been in the industry for 5-10 years, they've got a list. And if they don't know, they know who to go to get that. So I would just say make those connections, do whatever homework you can. Again, LinkedIn, it's an easy way to find people, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to connect with them. And then utilize whatever resources you have, Naturally Networks, New Hope, whatever there may be.
Got it. Awesome. Well, I think we have just about wrapped up. Big thank you, Jonathan Lawrence, Benji Fitts, the whole Spins team, Natural Chicago team, Krista Schusler, Bob, Greg. Wonderful webinar. Look for your email. We'll be sending out the follow-up on this, including the recording, Spins offer, and I hope to see you at Expo West. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Time to get back to work. Have a great one.